Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today you shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Welcome to the Dominion Podcast. This is episode 30 or something.
Yeah.
36.
You kind of trailed off there, but I knew what you were saying.
We've done so many, it's hard to keep track. I feel like we're doing one of these every day, you know?
Yeah.
You know, every day is podcast day. I'm one of your hosts, Jeremy Boyd.
I'm Alex Klusterman.
And we got a special guest tonight. Sitting over here is the ever lovely and handsome and articulate...
The Augustine.
The Augustine. Saint Augustine. Well, you are a saint.
And you are an augur.
Correct?
Yes,
that's right.
I would like to take the title saint, as the Lord gives that to me.
That's right. He gives that to all of his
I'm
people.
clinging to that one.
Rylan Augur, who is the principal of the Kawartha Classical Christian School. What is it when you have to divulge your interest in a matter?
Yeah, disclose.
We all have to disclose that we're involved in this school. And so we're shamelessly promoting the school tonight, but not directly. In fact, what we really want to do tonight is talk more generally about education and the duty of Christians in the education of their children. Mm-hmm. This has obviously come up in a lot of our discussions recently as we're talking about dominion, we're talking about government, the role of family. So I don't know, Al, why don't you start us off? What is, what is the reason that Christians ought to take control of the education of their kids?
Well, because God commands it, for one. And I think one of the places we need to start before we engage in this conversation is just a call to humility. And by that, I mean the recognition that we are all prone, not only individually, but collectively, culturally, of having assumptions that are just so massively wrong and do not line up with Scripture.
Give me an example of that.
The adoption of a secular view of what education is.
Right. So
we often read the New Testament and we read Paul talking about making some reference to a philosopher of the day, or we do our background study and we realize that he's challenging these cultural assumptions that they had, or the Old Testament about the gods and the idols. And I think it's easy for us to overlook the fact that we are of the same nature and we have idols, and our culture has idols, and we have, just as creatures, a finite understanding about God. And when it's not shaped by his word, it can err in the way that it always does with every culture. And I think especially for Canadians, maybe because we've been shaped so much by Scripture, we assume as a culture then the things that we hold, and I'm talking about the things that we assume, those are the deep beliefs. The deepest beliefs you have are the ones that actually aren't articulated.
They're the ones that you never justify.
You never,
right? The ones
yes.
that you take them for granted.
Yes.
Right, that's the ones you're talking about.
Yes. Right? And so what we need to do is ask ourselves as Christian parents, but just as Christians, is our understanding of what education is shaped by Scripture, or is it really more of a reflection of our cultural understanding of education, which, as we get into, maybe as we talk more about classical specifically, it's really recent. I mean, our view of education as a culture is not even just historical, but secular. It's just actually a recent thing.
Yeah, it's very recent, and
it's a total failure in almost every respect. But so I want to pause and say, okay, what does Scripture say about education? And actually, Scripture has a lot to say. I'm going to read two texts that really have shaped a Christian view of education. Deuteronomy 6 is the first one. God's instruction to his people: "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." You know, the Shema, the confession of Israel. "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might." And These words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. Shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
Right. And so in a broad sense, that what that text is talking about is teaching the law, teaching God's law to our kids.
Yes.
But we extrapolate a greater principle from that too, right?
Yeah. And when they're on your doorposts in your house and your gates, it's not a narrow understanding of God's word that's kind of like Sunday school, but it's separate from all of life. It's that all of your life at every single moment needs to be understood through the lens of God's word. That's what that means. And so a lot of Christians have adopted, and we'll get into this, a very narrow, reductionistic, compartmentalized view of reality in general.
Right.
That there's these little compartments. There's my church, there's my education, there's politics,
there's my job,
there's medicine, there's my job, there's my marriage, there's my buddies, and all these little compartments that are not really related to one another, or we're not sure how they're related. But this is not a Christian view of the world, of reality.
Right.
And so here, even in the Old Testament, you see a parent's duty to inform their children of how God's word applies to all of life.
Right. It's interesting. I had a conversation this week with a brother who's got a new child, and he's thinking about what it means to raise a child, to be a faithful husband. His wife has health issues, and so he is actually unable to do a lot of the things he feels like he's supposed to be doing in life, going out and evangelizing or being at church as often as he would like. Mm-hmm. But his point that he said to me was, I think God is trying to teach me that my main job, my main role is in the home. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of, when you talk about these assumptions, I think a lot of them, even for Christians, is that in order to be fulfilled and to do the things that God wants us to do, we have to go out there, go out to the world. I need to get this job. I need to have a career. I need to do all this stuff. Whereas the primary role is in the home.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to speak to that before we move on? Or?
Yeah, well, Paul, the second text is from Ephesians, where Paul says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. And this is historically where Christians have got their theology of what education is, the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. And it's amazing that in the book, in the letter to the Ephesians, Paul starts out chapter 1 writing about all the blessings that Christians have received in Christ, everything that they've received. But he transitions in the book to practical application of that. And it isn't just, forsake all familial bonds and everyone become a missionary. It's, okay, how do you actually apply this to your life? Well, one way is people who have children need to raise their children to know the Lord.
Right.
That's their first duty and their primary duty. So when we think about how this applies today and why this is important, it's not because the public school system statistically has been doing a very poor job, even in its stated goals. So take with mathematics or something. The math scores are down. That's true. It's not because it's a bit of a gong show and children are in school and then they're home and then they're in school and then they're home and then they're on the screen. And it's really that a Christian view of education is totally different than what a secular materialist thinks about education. For the Christian, an education is about the transfer of an entire worldview.
Right.
Chesterton said, I actually have his quote, it's great. He said, education is simply the soul of a society as it passes from one generation to another. Whatever the soul is like, it will have to be passed on somehow, consciously or unconsciously. And that transition may be called an education.
Yeah, and I think one of the assumptions that a lot of people have is that the public education or the state education is a neutral education.
Yeah.
And any type of private education is sort of an indoctrination, an attempt to indoctrinate kids into a specific worldview. And we would say, amen, it is an attempt to indoctrinate people. But what people are missing is that the public system is the same way.
Oh, of course.
And it's indoctrinating people in a very worldly thing. So how does it feel being an indoctrinator, Rylan? I mean, you're at school every
Chief
day,
indoctrinator.
brainwashing children to be, good little Christians. Like, what's the deal, man?
Well, I'll be honest, it's a pretty joyful place to be.
Yeah.
So I guess you could say I'm a joyful indoctrinator.
Yeah.
I've been there. It is joyful.
Yeah. I would just, throw out to what you're saying there. There's a myth of neutrality, not just in education, it's really everywhere.
Yeah.
But perhaps Christians in our time are particularly ignorant of the one-sided or biased nature of the worldview in the public schools. I think people are just they tell themselves it's just education.
It's just math.
It's just math.
It's just science.
Right.
Yeah.
What worldview could you possibly teach with math?
But the reality is nothing is neutral. We always convey our worldview, and what we think and what we believe at the core of who we are always plays out in what we do and
Even
what we say.
how the material is taught, not even just the material.
Exactly.
Right?
What do you think a human is, and how do they receive information?
Right.
Exactly.
What is information?
Fundamental
What is
questions.
knowledge? How is that passed? These things all stem from more fundamental presuppositions about reality.
So that's an interesting question. So what is the Christian view of the transfer of information? Is it just you need this information? It's like you're downloading, a file onto a hard drive, or is there something more to it? What is the Christian view of that?
Well, I would say that the scripture teaches us the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So if you have any concept for what can be known in the mind of a human, apart from the absolute fundamental reality that apart from God, nothing can be known, you're starting on the wrong assumption. There's actually, we could run down a philosophical trail of it, but John Frame makes some really great points about the fact that where most philosophers go wrong is that they start from epistemology as opposed to starting from the assumption of the need for revelation. And that's where Christians start.
Right.
So I would say a Christian view of knowledge starts with we assume that God is and that he must be feared and trusted. That's
as the basis for all knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 And from there, as the scripture sort of unfolds that, right? If you're a human, you necessarily have to be taught. You're finite. You can't know everything. And so you are dependent on information coming to you through a medium, whether it's your eyes, your ears, or your other sense perceptions. And what the first thing that our senses actually teach us, as the scripture confirms, is that God is and he ought to be worshipped. Mm-hmm. So from there, the principle holds. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Once you grasp that, then you can move forward learning.
And in Proverbs, the fear of the Lord and wisdom is set as the antithesis to folly. Mm-hmm. And folly is actually the willful, we did a podcast on this, a willful suppression of the truth. It's the fool says in his heart, there is no God. Mm-hmm. The fool isolates himself. Whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. The fool loves, doesn't want to listen. He is only content with giving his opinion. The irony is, the criticism that says, we want to give them a neutral, secular, unbiased education. We don't want to give them a biased indoctrination. It's a totally ignorant statement. And apart from what the fear of the Lord does, it actually sets us free to be the most unbiased we could ever be, because we are open to receiving all information. Mm-hmm. So the Christian is open to receiving not only the revelation from God, special revelation in his word, but natural revelation to see the world around us and think about it coherently. Christians are the ones who developed science in universities and medicine and hospitals. And they caricature that Christians are just concerned with something spiritual, so to speak. I mean, we see this in the modern antithesis between faith and science as it goes in the rhetoric, or faith and reason or something like that. When a biblical worldview suggests this couldn't be further from the case, that Christians ought to be able to see and acknowledge and respond rightly to everything that is revealed in nature and in Scripture. Whereas apart from the wisdom of the fear of the Lord, we end up suppressing the truth. We distort it. We make it fit our worldview. We change the facts to fit our narratives. And Christians are prone to this as sinners, but it's not inherent to Christianity. Christianity is the gospel is the great anti-bias, you know? We will still have a worldview. We will still have presuppositions. But
because we're relying on revelation and Scripture as our source, ideally you're submitting your will and your mind to that.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally a humility issue. If you don't have the fear of the Lord and taking the posture that you're describing, where you say, I must receive in order to know, then you necessarily take the posture of, I must think, I must seek out, and not that those things are not things we do in the process of learning, but it becomes about what I do in order to gain knowledge. It fundamentally becomes the fear of self, or the reverence and worship of self. That's why it can only be one or the other. It's you either fear God and therefore are on the path to true knowledge, or you worship and love self and are on the path to destruction. That's just where it is.
And go ahead.
So it's really necessary in order for parents to educate their children properly, whether it's homeschooled or in a private institution. It's important for them to understand this, like the basis of knowledge.
Yeah.
They can't just... You know, what we don't want to say is that all you have to do is do homeschool or pay for a private school that you believe is doing a good job to be faithful in this area. You have to have the underlying worldview and presuppositions that the Bible has in order to be faithful in this area.
Yeah, but not even to the degree that a parent needs to be able to explain the concept of where knowledge comes from, but that a parent has to have the fear of the Lord. That if they fear the Lord, they will listen to what he says is right and follow it. It's not, what you're saying is right. Like I'm agreeing that they have to hold to the worldview, but holding to the worldview doesn't mean necessarily being able to articulate the ins and outs of the worldview. And a godly Christian parent can be one who simply fears the Lord and understands the responsibility that comes with it. To teach their children his way and his instruction. And it doesn't necessarily mean, well, I can articulate the Christian epistemology. That doesn't have to happen, you know?
No.
You can be a faithful parent.
But Christians need to reject the compartmentalization of knowledge. We need to reject the myth of neutrality, that some things are just neutral. They're not, there's no religious basis to them whatsoever. That reflects such a shallow reflection on the nature of that subject. I mean, of course, there's a sense to which 1 + 1 = 2 is more straightforward and is more less susceptible to gross misinterpretations because of one's worldview. That is true on one level. But even 1 + 1 = 2 is built on assumptions about reality and its constancy and its patterns and knowability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Which is why you see people trying to attack the basics of math and say, 2 + 2 does not equal 4. It can equal 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if you change the definition of 2 and 4 and plus, it can equal whatever you want.
Yeah.
It's funny, we've been talking about this in the logic class that I teach, but what our world is very good at is constructing valid arguments that contain false premises.
Right.
That's constantly what's happening. I mean, it's happening right now in our culture, in our government, and the way they present things. But it's the same with the math case, right? Well, here, let me present for you something that connects. But at the root, what they've done is they've changed the definition. They're working from different terms, or they are working from a different assumption. So everything sounds like a tight argument, but it's actually not. It's the premises are false, and therefore the conclusion is false. Right. So you can say whatever you want if you change your terms, if you change the terms, right?
So another characteristic of a Christian education is that it's a passing on of loves. So it's rooted in the fear of the Lord, but you notice in Deuteronomy, the command is first to the parents to love the Lord your God, and then to raise your children. And Christians for a long time have understood education to be, the teacher ought to love something and teach others to love it as well. And this is totally missing from modern education, that we reduce people to information receptacles, as some people have said. I forget who wrote that. As if just communicating facts is sufficient. But that betrays an ignorance about what a human is and what knowledge is and how one receives it. And so,
right. Are you just a meat computer?
Yeah, are you a meat computer?
I forget where I heard that, but it's an apt description of
We need a t-shirt that says that. Check out the Dominion Podcast store. But
coming soon.
So one of the reasons KCCS is such a joyful place is we've hired and people, Rylan as a principal, and all of our teachers are people who love the Lord, and they love the students, and they love what they teach. And so that is caught. It's not just taught, it's actually caught by the students. And you can't fake that. And the world even knows this to a degree. I mean, you get I watch a lot of sports, and so coaches are admired, or leaders on a team, they would say their passion. They're passionate about it. Right. I mean, we would put that in the terms of they loved it. Their energy and devotion were given to it, and it excited them, and other people were stirred by. Why does someone's passion encourage you? That's an interesting thing to say as a materialist. You know what I mean? But as people created in the image of God, like, love is contagious.
Yeah, I mean, passion in a secular worldview is just a chemical reaction in your brain. Right?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
But nobody's willing to own that at the deepest level.
Yeah.
No, because we all know it's not true.
Yeah. The other fundamental difference is that, according to Scripture, who bears the primary responsibility for education? Parents. And one of the Canadian assumptions is that the state is in charge of education. And it's actually dangerous to think otherwise, and irresponsible and weird. And but part of the problem might be we call it public education. Like, we don't say state-sponsored education, because that would sound like communist or American, which I know are not the same, but that's just, where do we hear state-sponsored? Canadians don't talk that way. We talk about public. We don't. It's funny, even in the government things, we use language to hide the fact that it's a government thing. Right. This is a public service. It's
even the public has nothing to do with choosing the curriculum. All right, so I'm going to throw a grenade down in the middle here. Are you saying that it is not possible to faithfully educate your children and send them to a public state school?
It is impossible if the duty of a parent is to ensure that their children are constantly being immersed in the Word of God, in a worldview that reflects the Word of God, taught to understand every aspect of their life and every subject of human knowledge in light of Christ, and to be imitators of the people that they are following, which the doctrine of imitation has totally been dropped off in the last, I don't know how many years. If you think that an unbeliever can do that, you're crazy. How can an unbeliever imitate Jesus for your kids? How can an unbeliever teach your children to love the Word of God that they don't know or understand or love? How can an unbeliever teach your child to understand how Christ is Lord over all of life and every domain of human existence belongs to him? That's how I'd reverse the question. I'm not going to fall into a little trap of like, you're against public school. It's like, no, you just tell me. You just tell me the Bible is clear about these things. You just explain to me how someone who doesn't believe any of that can do all of that.
I think what people hear when you say something like that is, you don't think people know how to teach things in the public school, or I know a lot of people that work in the public school system.
Yeah.
And they're faithful Christians working in that system, and so are you saying it's impossible? And so people hear that, but what we're talking about is something on a more fundamental level.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, I think you can train a parrot to eat a cracker.
Yeah.
Like, yes. Do I think that someone can teach your kid to tie their shoes and learn the alphabet and math and even learn a great deal of things and even develop character and all of these? I absolutely do that. But it falls so far short of what we're called to do.
Yeah, that's important. When you gave the idea of training a parrot to eat a cracker, because if education is training, you've missed the point, which is actually one of the biggest problems with the mindset around university right now, that everyone goes to university with the assumption that you're being trained for a particular job.
Right.
That's not what the university
more of
was
a
created for.
vocational.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with training. Training is good. Training for a particular skill or task is fine, but that utilitarian view of education is one of the fundamental problems with state education, because the education and coming back to the idea of it's the fear of the Lord, it's meant to be something that is about the soul. Like you said, what is a child? Who is a child? What are they? And if you view them as simply a cog in the societal machine, well then, yeah, everything is about just training them to eat the cracker, whatever that cracker might be, right? But if
that's why the public schools are just so run by activism now.
Yeah.
It's like, and I know people, my wife went to teachers college, and I know people who went, and so much of it is actually just learn the buzzwords and learn to be an activist and learn to take on all these woke things. It's like, does anyone even know how to teach math anymore? We're kind of assuming, it's funny, we're having a conversation that actually reflects like 40 years ago, 20 years ago or whatever. It's like, you do know that most people can't teach math. Like, this whole fake idea of, well, at least they teach math well and they're teaching you the classic works of literature and they're just not it's like, where's that happening?
Yeah, if they teach you the classic works of literature, it'll be all about how the author was a racist, and the whole thing exemplifies an old racist system and blah, blah, blah.
My wife we were talking about how her prof absolutely desecrated John Donne's Batter My Heart, Three-Person God.
How dare he?
Into something, yeah. I don't know if you've read that poem.
You should be able to do pistols at noon for that kind of thing. Maybe we'll edit that part out.
No, that's fine. Yes.
No, but just the point is they take those things and they turn it into their agenda. But bringing back to what you were saying about public education, it's like turning that question back to parents. Can the public educator do the things that the scripture says are required of you?
Yeah.
If you view a child as a soul and you view education as a nourishing of the soul, then no, you cannot possibly say that an unbeliever can nourish the soul of your child
in the way that they ought to.
Yes.
And this is, again, I touched on it, but the doctrine of imitation is central. Jesus said, I only do what I see my Father doing. Human beings learn by imitation.
Christ's first command is follow me.
Follow me. And what he does with the disciples for 3 years is they follow him in his whole life, the rabbi, not just when he gives his Sermon on the Mount, not just when he's in the synagogues, like every aspect of his life they observed. And this is what education is. This is why parents have to play a primary role, because you can't actually farm that out. And so it's like, oh, you don't think. So then it becomes, okay, then it's not just information transfer, it's the people that I want my child to be like. And what we're not saying is that there aren't decent people, sincere people in public education. We're not saying that whatsoever. We're saying, though, that the standard for our kids is more than they would imitate decent, well-intentioned people. It's that they would imitate people who fear God and love him with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. It's a way higher bar. And what we've done is we've just totally redefined education, and we've lowered the bar so low as parents. And we've all grown up in that. None of us, well, you did some private education. You went to a Christian school for a little bit.
Yeah, very briefly.
Very briefly. But all of us grew up in the public school. And
just wanted to get it over with.
Yeah.
Right? That was my method, right? It was just, okay, I'm just going to get the grades I need to get over this and get on with my life.
Yeah.
Right? And everything I did outside of school was the important stuff, and everything in school was just like completely unimportant.
Yeah. And that's the way a lot of people feel. So, so we thought we need to do something different.
So how does a private school fit into a system where we're talking about the parents being in control?
Yeah.
I mean, are they still not handing over that control to other people?
If you're not careful.
Yeah, well, that's, I was going to say, just because it's a private school doesn't mean that it is all of a sudden a Christian school or that it is valuing those things. And that's something that we talked about when we started the school, was making sure that one of the fundamental principles is if you're going to run a school where children are put under your care, one, you have to have the utmost care taken for how you're going to structure that school, who are the people you're going to get to teach there. But you also need to make sure that a foundational principle is this is a delegated authority. That this is not we're not establishing ourselves as people who suddenly have a right to teach, who have the authority to instruct, but that parents are coming to us and delegating that authority. That when we teach under the parent's authority. I'm teaching a child because the parent has asked me to teach that child.
Yeah, and as a Christian parent, we see this principle in the church as well, that although fathers, for instance, are charged with the ultimate responsibility in the home to make sure that their children are receiving a Christian education in its fullest comprehensive sense, we still see that God gave some to be teachers in the church. And so it doesn't mean, and you can run into this problem, some people overreact and think it means that parents are the exclusive influence or teachers of their children. And that's just on its face wrong, because we know that Christians ought to be going to church and learning from teachers. Yeah. And the letter to the Ephesians, he addresses children in the letter. Children obey your parents, which means that children were present in church learning from teachers who weren't their parents. So it doesn't rule out, and I would say Scripture requires a more comprehensive view of the community, says that we can help one another and we can learn from one another. And families are strengthened as those who have gifts with teaching in the community teach. So there's a way in which you can fulfill your responsibility as a father, and still your wife can do a lot of the teaching. And there's a way that you as a couple, a married couple, can be fulfilling as parents your responsibility to instruct, with also supplementing your instruction with the help of others. You need to be very intentional about it, though, because it's easy for Christians to, there's a great classical Christian school here, and I send them to. You do the youth group thing. Remember, youth group? It's like, I'm going to drop my kid at youth group, and the youth pastor will fix them. Yeah, like, how are all those people doing, by the way? Like, let's just think of the top of our head.
It's a miracle that I'm still here. I'll put it that way.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm glad you're here, Jer.
No, it's only by the grace of God. It's not for any anything that my youth pastors did.
The Wednesday thing.
Oh, the Wednesday thing.
You know, I got
That's right.
stabbed at that youth group. The only time I've been stabbed was at that youth group.
I can't say I've ever been stabbed.
Yeah.
Okay, was it like a shank, a pen, a sharpened pen?
It was something.
You don't know what it was.
No, the guy was apparently a drug dealer, and he stabbed me.
Oh, well. I got to find out what happened there. I'm
Yeah.
get more information on that.
Fortunately, he stabbed me in the belly.
Okay.
So it didn't really, it was like,
Well, whatever.
there's a
dude.
lot of other places that might have done something, but that wasn't one of them. It's like his whole arm was engulfed and it just didn't do anything. Sorry, that was a little bit
So
of a
your
rabbit
whole
trail.
your whole idea of Christian education comes from the fact that you got stabbed at youth group.
I mean, it set me on a path of
That's right.
discovery. I need to protect my kids.
Can't let my kids get stabbed.
Can't let them go to evangelical youth groups.
Oh yeah.
But yes, there's the abdication of responsibilities. So as a school, we need to think about this. As a school board, we think about this. As a parent, I think about this. And, all of the parents at their school are not only involved, but I mean, you have to be happy and trust your teacher. Like the biggest question is, do I want my daughters to be like that person? And I can say with all of our staff, 100%. If my daughter grows up to be like Principal Auger or Mrs. Kloosterman or Mrs. Inglis or, Mrs. Brown or Mrs. Kloosterman, the music teacher, I'm a happy guy. I'm happy. That's just great. And anything less than that, it's like, well, I mean, they do a good job, but it's like you're just lowering the bar so low for your kids. But that's the question that has to be at the forefront.
So what got you guys interested in following the classical model? Like when you were thinking of we're going to start a school, what sort of drove you in that direction?
We're elitists.
I was gonna say something like that.
You think children should still learn Latin? Come on, I mean,
Yeah. Well,
these kids do
We
learn
like doing
Latin,
it
by
the
way.
hard way, Jer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, once you go down the rabbit trail and realize you need to do a lot of thinking about your assumptions of education, you kind of go back to the beginning and you're like, what is education? What are kids? How do they learn? And you just start reading and realizing that, many, many people have thought about this. There's people who have been wonderfully educated throughout the history of the world, especially since, Christendom. And we should maybe be listening to them. And so I don't know exactly what book I read, but they made the case for a classical Christian education. Who was it? Dorothy Sayers, who wrote an essay.
Yeah, Dorothy Sayers says the lost tools of learning. But you've probably read that from Wilson's book, Recovering the Lost Tools of Learning.
Yeah. And he's referencing an essay that was written. Maybe you could talk about that. She went to Oxford or something.
Oh, the details of her life I will not be able to get straight. But yeah, she definitely taught at one of the schools in England. But primarily what she's trying to articulate even then, and she's a contemporary of Lewis.
Yes, this is in the
Chesterton.
1900s.
Yeah. Even at that point, she is lamenting the fact that education is not teaching the fundamentals of what we would call the tools of learning.
Yeah.
The tools of truth perception, of being not just being able to know some facts. Anyone can be told something and they can stick it in their mind. I mean, though not today
Right,
because
but
you just have Google for that. But
how to sift information and discern truth from it.
yes, how to actually learn something.
So
If you
not what to learn, but how to learn.
Yes. And if you can equip a child with the tools of how to learn, now necessarily you teach someone how to learn by teaching them what to learn, but teaching them how to think by teaching them what to think. You have means, but we've abandoned that mindset that what you want to equip kids with is intellectual virtues. Essentially, is what we would call them. But yeah, we kind of lost that. And Sayers' essay has inspired a lot of people to come back to that. But there's a whole wealth of literature that is making an appeal for good education. I was just reading today John Milton, the famous English poet. He has a small essay on education. Even in his day, he's lamenting the fact that there is a great work to be done in renewing education. And I think there's something to be said about people constantly with an eye to making sure that there isn't a mission drift in education are the ones who are going to be the most faithful in it. So it started there. It started with us being essentially looking at ourselves and recognizing, oh, we didn't get that. We didn't get an education that gave us the tools to learn. We didn't get an education that equipped us with the kind of patterns of thought and even just the content of thought that was rich. And when you start introducing what the classical model words, the sort of classical buzzwords, truth, goodness, and beauty. I mean, just ask yourself, did your education really furnish your mind and nourish your soul with truth, goodness, and beauty?
No.
I just feel like most people need to be honest and say no.
So I went to the public state system in French immersion.
Same.
And so the majority of my education was in French. And all of my French teachers in French class, so where we're learning French literature and stuff, they were all existentialists. So I got to read all like the Camus and Molière and all these other guys. And it was interesting. Even then I knew like something was up. I'm like, this stuff is really bleak and it's a whole different world. But there, like Camus was, good writer, engaging and all of that. But the worldview behind it is so bleak and dark. There's no beauty to it. Definitely didn't furnish my mind. I got a good insight into what a narcissistic existential worldview is all about. So that's good.
That is good.
Yeah.
Don't want to do that.
I could recognize that it was completely meaningless and futile, even back then. Anyway,
And we're seeing this played out. I mean, there's the character piece, but like the last 2 years have demonstrated on a large scale the absolute inability to think.
Yeah.
Like you literally believe the most irrational things. People believe total contradictions and they can't tell their contradictions and they don't care to think about it. It's like, and the reason is they're not taught to actually think about it. They're taught to do what they're told. Like, I'm the one who tells you this is what's true. Write it on the test.
Which is what you get when you look at human beings as just meat computers and you're trying to download information into their brains.
Yeah. And critical thinking now just means being critical. Right. And then thinking is critical thinking, which is ironically extraordinarily conceited and is a great obstacle to any meaningful thought whatsoever. Thinking you know everything, right? I remember university being like that. Seminars would make you want to just cry or leave, It's like just the incapability of having a meaningful conversation.
I quit the English program. I started in the English program in my undergrad, thinking that textual analysis would be a great sort of leeway into moving to a seminary, a master's of theology or something afterwards. And I abandoned English because the seminars were just full of people that wanted to read their thoughts and feelings and opinions into the text, as opposed to actually saying, well, what did the author actually have to say? Why did they actually write this way? It's just pure narcissism. And now there may be some good English programs out there still. I hope there are.
You don't have to name what institution that was.
I won't. But
we all know.
But we all know. Check his bio.
Yeah, don't read my bio.
Check his bio.
Yeah. But that's what actually got me onto history, because it was in history that I actually still found people who were looking, at least at that time.
Yeah, it's probably
things are probably taking a turn now, but teachers who wanted to say, okay, well, what happened? Let's assess let's look to the content, look to the sources, let's read it and try and land somewhere. And you need people like that, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe some distinctives of a classical education One, the big thing is what we call the trivium, and that is it depends how people use that term. That could refer to the stages of an education. So typically, what is it? K to 4 is the grammar stage, and then 5 to
8
is
sort of the logic stage.
Yeah.
And then you have your 9 through 12, your high
Is
school,
a rhetoric.
the rhetoric stage.
And in the beginning, we're really focusing on basically giving the facts of things. So there's a lot of chanting and reciting and singing and memorizing. And then in the logic phase, you teach not only formal logic, which doesn't happen anymore, but you encourage students to ask the questions of why. And you're teaching them how to think. And then in the rhetoric phase, the goal and the climax of an education is to learn to communicate and to defend such things. So there's a heavy emphasis on the written and oral defense. And we think that this, and people have for hundreds of years thought that this works well with the development cycles of a child. And I can say young children love to sing and chant and memorize, and they're so good at it. This is why everyone knows it's easier to learn a language or an instrument when you're young.
Yeah.
Your brain, the elasticity and everything is just well situated.
Sometimes I feel like I can't learn anything anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And but the trivium, interestingly, this triad also is how you learn anything at any given moment. You need the facts of the situation. You need to actually understand what they mean, and you need to be able to articulate them. And until you've done that, you don't have true understanding at all. And so this is woven in, and then the kind of diet of things is great books and literature, and we follow the course of history, you know. So it's a very rich education that is suited for the child. I don't know if there's anything you want to add. There's so much we could say, but that's kind of your elevator speech.
The trivium can be a great. It's an interesting word, so it leads to some interesting conversations.
Yeah.
But the essence of the classical portion is again coming back to the idea of nourishing the soul on truth, goodness, and beauty through the means of the liberal arts, which includes then not just thinking about trivium as stages of learning, but also the heartbeat of what you are teaching them. That these are also subjects. They actually are arts or skills that you need to learn. Art is a better word, but the art of grammar and the art of logic and the art of rhetoric are necessary tools in the mind of a child for grasping, God primarily, and to know him and to live for him and to enjoy him. The classical portion, it comes into more than just you're not just picking up classical books and therefore you've done it, but it's a whole way of thinking about education. So we've actually hinted at a lot of those things, just as we've talked about what Christians should think about education, and that's Christians essentially picked up and made education. Look, when we talk about classical education, we're really talking about thoroughly Christian education, like truly Christian education, not just we.
It's not a
we
fad.
Believe the Bible here, yeah. This is. If you want to teach that a child has a soul, if you believe in the doctrine of imitation, if you believe that God is to be feared first and then all knowledge follows from that, the classical model and pedagogy is the way you get there. And that's we didn't just say, hey, classical is really kind of cool and I think it'll get a lot of people coming to our school. And no, we just realized, if we're going to teach our children to know and fear the Lord, this is the path to do it. Embodied learning, a feast of ideas, and teachers who are worthy of imitation, and all of that kind of comes from the classical model. There's more we could say, but that's kind of the nice thing about it too. If you're listening to this, start doing some research on classical education, and you won't be disappointed.
Yeah,
it's not elitist; it's beautiful. It's an amazing thing.
So maybe there's a practical piece to this: is if people are listening and they're not grossly offended by us, and they're like, you know what, I should think about that. What are some books they could read? You mentioned a couple.
Yeah, I think Wilson's Recovering the Lost Tools of Learning is an excellent start, especially given what we've said about the way parents tend to think about the neutrality of public education and not seeing the importance of Christian education. Wilson does a great job of doing that and then bridging it into the idea of classical being the fulfillment of that. If you want to do a bit more of a deep dive into classical education, there's an edited work by Wilson called Repairing the Ruins, which has lots of short chapters.
Very good.
Short chapters, which are they just really break it down. Christopher Perrin has written, we actually have this available on our website. It's a short little PDF. It's called An Introduction to Classical Education for Parents.
What's our website?
Our website is kawarthaclassical.com.
Kawartha Classical Christian School.com.
I guess for some people, Kawartha might be a weird word. For us, we're used to it because it's the region we live in.
Kawartha.
Yeah, Kawartha Classical. Yeah. And
what about C.S. Lewis, Abolition of Man?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest
that one, I think you won't get so much about the nature of a classical education as you will get a very helpful articulation of the mindset that rules our world right now and what has destroyed public education.
And he wrote that when? That was written in the 60s? 70s? 60s?
I think...
Maybe even a little earlier.
I think earlier than that, actually.
Yeah, but that book does touch on the idea of sort of awakening the child to something, whereas the educational system of his day was deadening them to it by sort of turning everything into a utilitarian type of end game. So, yeah. Any others?
I'm trying to think of the best ones
for people
who are...
What are you reading right now? So we're going to do a little reading right now, so we might as well start. What are you reading right now?
I have too many books on the go that are not being finished fast enough.
What's the last book you closed?
The last book I closed.
Or finished. Even
I was reading Kingdom Through Covenant by Gentry and Wellham recently, which is a hefty tome.
It's big.
And I've been working slowly through John Frame's History of Philosophy and Theology, which is an excellent book and well worth the read.
You're a big John Frame fan, aren't you?
Honestly, I haven't read. This is the first book of his that I've really picked up, and I actually disagree a bit with him about how to view and read the Greeks, but that might be because I'm a bit of a Greekophile. I guess
You're a classicist.
Yeah.
You're a Neoplatonist?
Yeah. No. Certainly not.
How do you feel about Aquinas?
I think he's...
A lot of people talking about him lately.
Yeah, I think he's brilliant. I think Frame would say that he doesn't... That he leans on Aristotle too much and not enough on the scriptures, which is probably true in some. That's probably a healthy critique of Aquinas. Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Al? What are you reading right now?
I'm reading Truman's book.
The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self?
Yeah. I'm preaching on Genesis 1, creation, human sexuality this week. And really that conversation is the overflow of more fundamental things like how we view ourselves. And he talks a lot about expressive individualism.
Right.
And really the whole all the sexual stuff now is a reflection of those ideas and postures. Right. And so I'm going to start there. I think it might be a multi-week thing, but yeah, so I'm reading and enjoying that. I picked up a J.C. Ryle biography again, I think by Ian Murray, and Ben gave it to me years ago now, but I watched Little Women, the newer one, and it was fantastic.
Okay.
And it made me realize that I want to read 19th century English or British authors.
I've never read that book.
I told you that you need to read Dickens.
Oh, so you've never read Dickens?
No.
Man, start with Tale of Two Cities.
That's what I'm reading.
Is that the one that starts in the graveyard?
No, in the best of times and the worst of times.
Well, maybe it was Twain. No, it was
There is there are graveyard scenes in that book,
I just found it really morbid. One of the ones. Anyways, I'll take your recommendation. I want to read the Space Trilogy because you brought it up.
Yeah,
Lewis's
that's good too.
Space Trilogy.
Never read it.
Yeah, I've read the first one only, and I actually There's some students reading it at the school.
Yeah,
right
I
now.
saw that.
That kind of.
But the Ryle thing is a good. He's of that time period, and he was a dude. He was raised in wealth, and he went to Eton College. I believe that's part of Oxford. But then his father lost everything, and he ended up going into ministry rather than pursuing politics. And he ended up being kind of like the blue collar scholar. He really reached out. The first bishop of, I believe, Liverpool. And
He's got a book on preaching, right?
yes.
Okay.
Simplicity
I've read that.
in Preaching.
J.C. Rao. He's got a book on holiness. No?
His book
got
on
that too.
holiness is one of the best things I've ever read on the nature of sanctification and justification and holiness. And I thought, man, if everyone read this book, so many of the debates we've been having over the last 10 years just wouldn't even be a thing. So that's what I'm reading.
Nice. I would, if you're going to read Dickens, I'd read Tale of Two Cities. I'm actually reading Oliver Twist at the moment. I haven't read that before, but Tale of Two Cities is in my top 3 of all time. Great book.
Good to know because I'm in the thick of it.
Yeah.
So
Now I didn't read it. I listened to it, so maybe it's different if you're actually reading it. But I love listening to fiction.
yes,
Rather than reading, and I do so much driving for my job that it makes it really easy to do that. So, yeah, very good. What part of the book are you in?
I think I'm just past the first part, but even the first part was great.
Yeah.
The little story of the reunited father and
Oh,
daughter.
the
and,
cobbling and
yes.
It's why, so descriptive.
Yeah, he's an excellent. I think you would appreciate one that there is a certain virtue to his writing, like it's not dark and twisted, and even when it is morbid, it's just real. But he also has a bit of a wit to him,
yeah.
and I think you would appreciate the subtle wit
Great
that
turns
he
of
writes
phrase.
with. Yeah.
As it relates to education, what I appreciated about Little Women when we watched it is, and Rebecca, who's read the books, my daughter's listened to all of them. There's multiple ones. By the time she was 6, she'd listened to all of them, which is probably why tonight she said to Rebecca, "Mother, I beseech you," when she was making a request.
Is that the same author as Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility?
No, this is
No.
Louise May Alcott.
Oh, okay.
But what I noticed about it was the depth of character and thought and recognition of what's going on around you is so much deeper than a Marvel movie. And I just thought, man, I long to read and listen to and learn from people who have thought deeply about the human experience. And I think 19th century British authors, as far as the English language go, that was kind of a height. Lewis, Tolkien, they're the overflow of that, and then it's gone. So that's what an education can do. You know, if people are dating, when I say, maybe this is where I close on, like watch Avengers and then watch Little Women and just get back to me on that one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just I'll leave that one with you.
Just leave this right here.
Or better yet, read the screenplay for Avengers and read Little Women, and then get back.
Yeah.
Then get back.
Yeah,
to
exactly. You don't even, because you can't compare the lights and stuff.
That's
yeah.
right. Well, this has been great.
Yeah.
I kind of want to just keep talking about books here.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I watched over the holidays. I watched Dune. You recommended Dune?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. What'd you think?
It's interesting because I've never read the books and I had no idea what they were about. So
Okay.
I like going into a situation like that where you have no idea.
I was the same.
I really enjoyed it. And the one thing that threw me off was the soundtrack, which was good, was, you know, the kind of soundtrack you get in a movie trailer? It's always suspenseful because they
Yes.
want you to keep watching as if something's about to
Yes.
happen. The entire movie is like
Yeah.
that. And so there was never any musical resolution. You always felt like the plot was just about to start.
Yes. And
Because
then the movie ends.
And then it ends. And now they're making
That's a great point.
they're making another one. But
Jer, only you would be able to make that comment about the
That's
music.
a great
You
point.
would see
it's
that.
a suspense the whole time, just
Yeah.
suspense, which I'm not against. And obviously they were doing it on purpose. And it was very, very well done. Everything about it was well done. But not knowing the story, I kept thinking, when is the story going to start? Mm-hmm. Right? It's like they kept setting it up and setting it up. So I don't even know how many books there are in the series.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is there like 1, 2,
I don't
5?
know. I actually
No
haven't read
idea.
them either.
Anyway, it was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I look forward to the next one.
I noticed you didn't answer my message about that country song I sent you.
I didn't listen to it. You know
Okay.
what? I got onto something else and I never went back to listen to it.
Listen to it with some headcans on. Tell me
Okay.
what you think.
I like country music. I don't particularly like modern country music.
I know,
the
that's
pop
why I
stuff.
sent it to you.
Sometimes it's catchy, but it's usually so vapid.
What's the song?
Yeah, what's the song? What is it called?
Doing this. Who's the guy who sings that?
Is that Luke Bryant?
No.
It's the only one I know.
Luke Combs, right? Luke Combs.
Luke Combs doing this.
Yeah. It's like everything good about modern country, but that could also mean everything bad about modern country.
Yeah, likely does.
Like super catchy, great hook, kind of sentimental, hit you in the heart.
but nothing actually happened.
So I actually I sent it to Jared. I'm like, this is either Jeremy's going to either be like, yeah, I like that, or he's going to be like, oh, that tells me a lot about Alex.
Yeah, maybe I'll listen to it on the way home and get back to you. Finally.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah, all right. Well, thanks for joining us on the Dominion podcast. Got to hit those sound effects. It's been great. I'm sure there's plenty more to talk about on this subject, but for now, I'll leave you with this. May he have dominion from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. May all kings fall down before him, all nations serve him. We'll see you next time.